Okay. So now, before we just do a deep dive about certificates and keys and what are the options available inside the Salesforce about certificates and keys, try to understand the concept of certificates and keys first. Now, in our daily routine or in our entire student life, basically we receive a certificate when we achieve something or when we do something to recognize that particular work, to authorize that particular work, that hey guys, hey Shanta, you have done this, right? You have achieved this, right? So this is the authorization value, this is the authorized value, okay, which will determine and which will tell the whole world, tell the whole people community that yes, this guy has done something. Manish has done extraordinary in a particular work. That is the reason Manik has been provided a certificate, and that certificate given to Manish. That means it is a kind of authorizing Manish's ability, Manish's capability. Correct? And what are the keys things? Now, key is basically it's a simple lock and key concept, the generic concept of keys. Whenever you want to unlock something, you need some key. Okay. Now, in software industry, basically we do have mainly two type of keys. One is your encrypted keys, one is your decrypted keys, right? One key basically which will make the data in encrypted format, and another key basically which will help you to decrypt the same key which was encrypted. Now, if I will ask that what are the keys basically available into the market to do this, we do have two types of keys. One is public key, one is private key. Now the private key is basically your own key. That means you are the whole and sole responsible to maintain that key. That is the reason it is a private. However, the public is completely the other side of the picture. That means that it is exposed to the whole world. That is the reason it is called a public key. So this is the generic concept about the certificates and your keys. Now, coming to our topic, okay. So if I will say that what are the relation and why we are discussing about the Salesforce certificates and key and how the certificates and keys are involved with the Salesforce, considering the Salesforce, that means that Salesforce certificate key pairs are used for the signatures that verify a request is coming from your organization. They are used for authenticated SSL communication with an external website or when using organization as an identity provider. Forget about this. You do not have to remember this. All you think about that whenever we go through any particular scenario, okay, we do have two things. One is your consumer, okay, and one is your publisher. More precisely, one is your publisher and one is your subscriber. Now I am integrating two systems. Now among those two systems there must be one system or one application has to behave as an identity provider, and one application has to behave as an service provider. Okay, so that means if I am using two application and that's two application, if I would like to integrate, there should be some details common around or across the two orgs. That means remember just more precisely if I will say, okay, give me a second. Okay, So suppose I have one particular, this is my first application. Okay. Now in this first application and this is my second application. What I want my integration between the first application and the second application. Now the first application, let's assume that it is an identity provider. Now what is identity provider? Because this particular application will be identified by the subscribed application. So the second application, I am saying that it is a subscriber application. Okay, so that means that this is actually calling this particular application. Now when this particular application is calling this particular application, that means there must be some identity which is identified by the second application, and that is the reason the integration between first and second application is being established. Hope I'm clear. Now, if I am trying to do this, right, I need a certain common factor between this particular two application. Okay. Now, when this common factor required for these two application, that common factor can be established as a certificate as well, right? So what I can do, I can create a certificate from the first application, and then I can ask the second application to consume this certificate so that they will have a common ground, they will use a common environment, right? And with this particular common environment, they will establish the connection. Now when they will establish this connection, they will be able to transfer the data securely. Okay, so this is all about your certificates. Now what about the keys? What the key is basically, it's like, as I told you, the key are to save your data inside a locker. Okay, suppose in our Salesforce org we are using many things which needs to be encrypted each and every format, like credit card number. Okay, I am using a banking application, and inside the banking application I do have my credit card number, my credit card CVV number, my credit card expiration date. Do you really think that these particular things I can store without any encryption? If I will store without any encryption, then tomorrow when you will get into this particular org, you will get all the numbers, right? And you can use these all details. So you have to encrypt a certain amount of data, certain things of data which client will ask for. So these are the very much secure things which we do want to be encrypted at every cost. Apart from that, we do have our Aadhaar number, right? Our PAN number, right? So these are also a kind of data which needs to be secured at any cost. Now, how this particular security will happen? This security can happen with the help of keys. Okay, so if you just use certain key, then this key will all responsible to encrypt this particular data. Once these data will be encrypted, you cannot decrypt that particular data if you are not using a decrypt key, right? Or a particular private or public key. Now your question should be that how do I install the key? There are many formats, there are many places where you can generate the key, where you can install the key inside your Salesforce org. And apart from that, you can buy the key also from many organizations. Buy the key, install into your Salesforce org, and once you install into your Salesforce org, it will ask that what are the fields you love or you like to encrypt. You give those names, it would be automatically encrypted. And while decrypting, basically you need to use another key. So when the key will be used in a combination. One is your encrypted key and one is your decrypted key. Now, there are certain things which basically already actually available with the Salesforce. You can explore those. What are the inbuilt keys available inside some Salesforce org? And if that inbuilt keys, if you want to use, you can definitely use of them, and you can encrypt the data and decrypt the data. If you have the budget to spend amount, then you can definitely buy a key from a reputed organization or reputed software site. Okay, so this is a basically overview, and most common application of these certificates are SSO and custom HTTPS domains. So that means that whenever you have been asked to configure a single sign-on, or you have been asked to configure the integration using HTTPS domain, you can use this certificates key. I have already told about that, but certificates mainly for SSO things, for HTTPS security things, we can use. Now, the certificates, basically there are certain parameters or certain naming convention which you need to follow, which I can definitely just walk you through when I will go inside the Salesforce org, and there I will show you that what are the naming convention you can put. But you need to put a unique name, and it should not include any space, any underscore. It should not be end with, and not contain two consecutive underscore. And that's how basically Salesforce designed. So they have built their software in a fashion that if you try to create a key, I mean a certificate, using two underscore side by side or one by another, then it won't allow. Now the key size, there are two sizes of key. One is your 2048 bit key, and one is your 4096 bit key. Now what are the differences? Basically nothing. It 2048 bit basically lasts for 1 year, and 4096 bit key is last for 2 years. That means after 2 years, this particular certificate and keys will be expired. And once it is expired, then what will happen with the existing data? The existing data would be also, you need to decrypt before the key got expired. And if you do not decrypt that particular data, and your key got expired, then you have to certainly contact the key provider from which or software you bought the key, right? And you can have a maximum 50 certificates. I'll come into details. Now, what are the ways to generate the certificates into Salesforce? There are certain ways to generate the certificates inside Salesforce. One is your self-signed certificate. That means that you would be whole and all responsible to generate the self signature certification. That means you do not require any other person's authorization for that certificate to be granted. You are whole and all responsible for that certificate to be granted. If you are doing some integration with some other third party, and if you tell them that, hey, I am generating this self-signed certificate, they may tell that, no, I do not want your self-signed certificate. Let's go to some common authorizing organization who will authorize our certificate. Okay, so to do that, you need to take a help of number second point: generate a certificate signed by a certified certificate authority. Now, where certificate authority is a separate organization who will be all responsible to authorize your certificate. You would be generating your self-signed certificate, but you need to send that particular certificate to those people. Okay, and once they will receive that certificate, then they will authorize that, and once they will authorize, then only that particular certificate is ready to use for both of your environment. That means the third party environment along with your environment. Now, mutual authentication certificate, Sometimes you do not, I mean, the stakeholder means you and the third party. You may think that why to go to the some other authority, some certificate authority to do authorizations. Let's just conclude this matter mutually, right? So in this case, what will happen, you both the parties, that means third party where you want to establish the integration, you will send a certificate to them and they will authorize, and once they will authorize, you will again receive that authorized certificate from them, and in this way the same certificate will be used by you and the third party. That means it is a mutual authenticated certificate. And your the API client. So basically, in this way, using this mutual authenticated certificate, you can configure your API client as well. Then the keys, master encryption keys, I have already talked about that. Keys are basically the main factor to encrypt the data, and master encryption keys can be available using your inbuilt Salesforce, or you can buy the keys from some other software, from some other third party, and you can encrypt the data, but you have to have the same combination of the decrypted key which will unencrypt your data. Remember one thing, if you do not unencrypt, or if you do not decrypt the data, that data cannot be used basically for certain operation. Suppose say there are certain operations, means what happen, a third party system want to access your Aadhaar number, and you are sending the Aadhaar number in an encrypted format, right? If you send them the Aadhaar number in an encrypted format, what can happen? They would be getting an encrypted value of Aadhaar number, and that Aadhaar number, if they want to validate inside their system, they won't be able to validate because it is an encrypted format. So either the decrypt key should have been placed into their system, so that whenever they would be retrieving the encrypted Aadhaar number from your organization or from your Salesforce org, they need to decrypt that particular Aadhaar number at their system first, and then they can use that. Or else what will happen, you can decrypt that Aadhaar number in your org and then give them the decrypted value into the transport layer or into the communication channel. But in that way, the security won't be maintained, because what will happen, the communication channel is getting the decrypted Aadhaar number in this case. Now, the sixth point is about the SAML. The SAML is basically mainly used is a type of, I would say, data format which is extensively used for single sign-on. I'll come later if into the SAML section. So now the various certificates, a little bit theory, but not much. So there are mainly three types of certificates which we use inside Salesforce extensively. One is your self-signed certificate, which I discussed, which is mainly .cst extension, and which is available all the editions inside in Salesforce. Number two is basically the self-signed but authorized with a third-party system. That means authorized with a certificate authority. Now your question can be that who does that certification authorization? There are many companies. You can see the name, some of the name: Komodo, GeoTrust, Semantic, right? So they are basically a popular name, a popular organization who actually authorize the self-signed certificate which you will generate. And this particular certificates, I mean, just a different extension. The earlier self-signed was a CST extension, but this is a CSR extension, though it is available in all the edition as well. And the mutual authentication certification, the mutual authentication, as I discussed, that this won't be your certificate which needs to have an authorization from Semantic, GeoTrust, or Komodo, but it would be mutually authenticated. But it has a certain rules, it has certain rules or certain limitations, this particular certificate always needs to be set up with the API only user configuration whenever you would be trying to integrate to system. So as we discussed in our earlier session, that we need to have a separate user with a permission set, that API user permission set, which would be all responsible for your integration, which would be all responsible to communicate and to get the data securely from your source org and to pass into the different or the third party system, different organization or third party system. So generally we use a particular different user. That particular user is mainly API only user permission set given, and this mutual authentication certificate has that particular criteria that use that particular user with a special port of 8443. The port also you can configure using your Salesforce. Now the transport security, sometimes what happens, sometimes basically instead of HTTPS, we have seen that many times we establish the integration or configure the integration instead of HTTPS with only HTTP. Okay, so that means that is not secured. Now your question can be, why HTTP we use? There can be certain parameters, certain limitations. We use HTTP over HTTPS, though it is not extensive, but some third-party systems, some third-party legacy system, they are built in such a format or in such a older technology that they may not use the HTTPS because their system is that much old. Their system is that much backdated, right? So they do not support. And if that particular system tells you that hey, I cannot support the HTTPS, then you have to take care using HTTP, and using HTTP you have to secure the particular integration as well, right? So in this communication mode, actually we need these certificates, we need these keys, which would be very much useful and which would be very much beneficial to establish that secured connections. Now, mutual TLS, I mean the mutual certification, just we heard about, and how this establishment actually happens. So you can see that. So the Salesforce basically we are using as a server, and this is the CPU picture which is using basically as a client. So the client basically say a hello message to Salesforce, then Salesforce responds. Salesforce responds with a certificate, and the Salesforce server basically they are requesting for a host certificate, client certificate, and once those certificates basically they have requested, the clients needs to send that particular certificate, and once Salesforce receive that certificate, then Salesforce understands that okay, this is a secured authentication or the secured channel where we can pass our data, and once that particular security is established, then the data is communicated through the client and the server. Now, encryption as keys, I already discussed about that, that for certain fields like SSN, credit card number, encryption is very much required, and to decrypt the field, a master key is required. The key is automatically assigned when you select a fields to decrypt. As I told you that a key is always comes with a combination. One is your encrypted key and one is your decrypted key. So you manage your own master key according to your organization's security and regularity needs. As I told that sometimes the keys are free, the keys are available, and sometimes clients very much specific about the keys, and you need to buy the keys from a specific software organization, and you may have to use only those keys. Now, once a key cannot be a lifelong, a key certainly have an expiration date, and once a key has been expired, then that particular key basically you can archive. And sometimes what happens, a key maintenance is very much required. A key mainly we have seen that the key have a lifespan about 1 year to 2 year. Okay, and that happens, then what will happen? We need to archive the existing key and create a new key. And whatever the existing key we did borrow or we just bought it, then we have to delete that particular key and use the new key. And these keys are basically Salesforce is giving all UI function or all the UI flexibility where you can import the keys, you can archive the keys, you can delete the keys, you can export the keys, everything you can do inside certificate and key management section in Salesforce Org. SAML basically, if I'll talk about SAML, that it is a kind of standard format or a kind of, it is not a certificate, I would say, but it is a kind of language, a language which is mainly used for the authentication and authorizations. But why I have included it into the certificate and key section? Because for single sign-on, we use the certificates, and along with the certificates, we have to take help of the SAML language if we want to configure a single sign-on between two Salesforce org. Now, your question can be that what is single sign-on? Single sign-on is just a generic terminology where you can use a single user ID and password for 5, 6, 10 Salesforce application. So you may have many Salesforce org, but you need to use only one user ID and password, and with the help of one user ID password, you can log in into different sandboxes, different Salesforce org. So that is basically your single sign-on feature. Now, certificate-based authorizations, I'll come later into this particular part, but before that, I will just navigate to you that how we configure the keys and the certificates. So first you just give a concentration on this particular org. Let's assume this is one of my org, and this is the org basically I am using for a single sign-on. Okay, why I am picking single sign-on? Because I can show you people the certificates, how we can use the certificates, and how the connection we can establish using the certificate. So let's assume that this particular application is an identity provider. That means this particular application we will be trying to access from some other application. So this is my second application from where I would try to identify this particular application. Now, how I can do that? I mean, for this both the application, I want to use a single sign-on. That means whatever the user ID password I have used to log in into this application, I can use the same login ID and password while entering into this application. So how I can do that? It's not very much complex, and but I won't go at that very end point where I would be establishing the complete single sign-on, but I will give, or I'll try to give you a generic idea about this. So to do that, first you go to the certificate and key management section. Once you go into certificate and key management section, here you can see these all things what we discussed. Create a self-signed certificate. Okay, so and create a CA signed certificate. Now if I will click and I will try to create a certificate, that would be your CRT extension. If I will create this particular one, that would be your CSR certificate. Okay, and then I already discussed about key. So if you want to use a key from some other third-party software, or you want to buy some key, you can definitely import from key store. Okay, or if you have some keys, which keys you want some other system to use, you can export those keys and you can give it to the third party system. So that way basically the encryption and decryption combination will be completed. Now let's go to your create a self-signed certificate. Okay, once you hit over this, then you will come over here and okay, this is super fast. Sorry guys. So here you just give a simple certificate name. So my SFDX codex, right? So if you do that, just create the type would be self-signed and key size. That's what we discussed, right? The 2048 and 4096. Nothing. Just we want to be this particular certificate to be not expired beyond. I mean, just to validate, or the validity should be 1 year. So that is the reason I will keep it 2048. So once I do that, I'll just save this particular certificate. So here I saved a certificate, and let it save. See here, when naming your certificate, only use letters, numbers, and that's what basically we have discussed, right? The certificate naming convention should follow as Salesforce actually asks you. Okay. So this unique name is already exist. So my SFDX, let's give one, and just remove this mine. This is my SFD products, and then try to save it. Okay. So here basically you have generated your certificate. Now what's the next step? You need to download this particular certificate. Let it download. So now here you can see this extension, the CRT. Okay. So now what happened, that if you go to the certificate and key management again, so and if your client actually tells you that, hey, I do not want your self-signed certificate, I want that particular certificate to be validated by some third party like semantic, then you need to come over here and you need to put all the details. Unless you put all the details, your other organization, that means the semantic, Komodo, those organizations won't be certifying that particular certificate, or won't be authorizing that particular certificate. Now I do not have any contact with the third party system, so I'm just ignoring this particular thing for time being. Once you do that, okay, once you do that, what is the next step? So suppose this is the first application. Give me a second. So the identity provider, first step, I have generated a certificate. Now the second step, basically go to identity provider and edit and select the certificate created. So what I want, my use case is, I want this particular application needs to be accessible through a single sign-on from this particular application. So that is the reason this is my identity provider, and this is my basically the platform, or basically my service hoster, or service hosting application. Now I'm going over here, and now to do that I need to go to identity provider over here. Go over here, and so go to identity provider, and here if you see. Okay, so here basically what you can do, you can edit this particular thing. Okay, so this basically, once you come to identity provider, you can see these particular details automatically, because this is your domain. See here, this is my domain, so it would be automatically there, it would be all existing. All you need to do, you need to edit, and you need to select the certificate which you want. Select the certificate. Just now I created this particular certificate, so let's use this particular certificate. So you are changing your IDP certificate. Changing your certificate may cause existing service provider to stop working. So that means my currently configurable identity provider for this application, from this application, will be broken if I will change my certificate. No harm. So I'm going to change this, and I'm going to establish, and I'm going to select this particular certificate. Now, what is the next step? So the next step is basically you are done with the certificates, you have downloaded the certificate, and you have already selected that particular certificate in your identity provider, and you have already downloaded that. Now go to the service provider. That means the platform where you are hosting your service, right? And in that you can just first need to configure the remote site settings, because ultimately whether it's a single sign-on, but ultimately it is a kind of outbound, right? It is a kind of call out. Call out is happening using this particular application. I am trying to invoke this particular application, or single sign-on, I am using this particular application. So that is the reason I have to configure the remote site settings. So go to remote site settings, and inside the remote site settings, you need to give this particular URL. What is the URL of this? This is the URL. So let's give this. So remote site settings, and here a new remote site, just a remote site URL you give over here, and SFDX codex, you just give it over here, and you simply save it. Okay, so that's it. You are good. And after that, now create, and now you need to do a single sign-on. Okay, so you go to single sign-on settings over here, and here you can see there are multiple buttons available. So the buttons are new from metadata file, and new from metadata URL. Okay, so first, what to do that, you need to do this SAML. As I told you, SAML is nothing but a simple assertion markup language. This markup language is supporting the SSO feature along with the certificate. This markup language is required, okay, to do that. So I need to enable this particular SAML. Once you enable this particular SAML, then what you can do, then you can just generate this particular new from metadata URL. Right now, how I can get a metadata URL? You download this metadata. So while downloading the certificate, you download the metadata as well. Now your question would be that what is this metadata and what is this certificate? These are nothing. All these are basically, these are all encrypted information about this particular org. Now how do you make sure that these are encrypted details about this particular org? You just go to any site like SSL shopper. Okay, so if you go to the SSL shopper, what will happen here, you can have all the flexibility to get the certificate details. Give me a second. SSL shopper certificate decoder. Yeah, so if you go over here, so this is a certificate decoder. Now go over there, and now what they are asking, that paste this certificate text. First, to do that, you need to open this certificate, right? Okay, so they are not allowing. Just go to downloads, and here basically go and this is my SFDX codex, right? So here, if you go to edit with Notepad++, you can see this is our encrypted format of data. Now, once you do a Control C, and if you go over here and do a Control V, that's it. And see, all these details you would be receiving over here. SFDX codex, that is the common certificate name which I have given. Organization, okay, this is totally controlled and managed by Salesforce.com. Organization unit, this is the ID of this particular organization. This organization is having a unique ID, right? So this is the ID, and locality, state, country, this is all coming from the state, because this certificate is from a Salesforce.com. So this all location basically registered with Salesforce.com. We know that their head office in CA, and they have maintained their certificates into that fashion. That is the reason any certificate you generate, you will get all this information. Okay, then there would be a specific serial number which would be a very much unique, right? So now when this particular certificate, if you go similarly into the metadata, so metadata is also having a certificate. Okay, so now if you just copy this particular certificate as well as like your certificate, so just copy this. Okay, so here we go. Okay, so no, so let me copy it properly. Okay, copy it. Okay, control C over here. Just go to SSL software certificate decoder, and if you just paste it over here. Okay, see here, my SFD, the same information actually is coming. Only one thing is that it was in metadata format and one is in certificate format, but both basically both actually give you the same purpose. Now, once you do that, what you need to do now, come into this particular subscribing application or the subscriber application where new from metadata file, and if you just give from this metadata file, give me some time with this. Or let's assume just I'll go for new from metadata URL. Okay, so the same purpose almost. Okay, so metadata URL, if you go and inside the metadata URL, go over here. So this is the URL basically you need to provide over here, because this is all whole your things specifically. Okay, so the remote site settings is specify a public URL from the remote site settings, which I already did, I believe. Remote site settings, new remote sites name, my Salesforce. HTTPS salesforce.com. Sorry, my this is so this is the products. Okay, put it over here. Syntax codex, new codex. Okay, so I have given a name, and now where I go, I will go to single sign-on settings, right? So here I'll come and new metadata file, and let me put this name in here. The XML file doesn't include your SAML 20 settings. You need it. Okay, so uh, fine. I need to go to this URL XML 2.0 identity provider. Okay, so here identity provider. If you go and here in the single sign on. Here, single sign-on settings. I do have the I do have this particular SAML enabled. So basically, I mean, this particular SAML we have enabled, but I need to check that why this particular URL is not working. But ultimately, the goal is that while configuring the single sign-on settings, you need to host and you need to consume the same metadata file which we have generated. Either you can import this particular SFDX codex certificate or the certificate which is inside the metadata file, and once you do that, then you can import from this particular settings using this URL or using this particular file. Or if that also is not giving the error, just give the details. You just fill up the details over here and choose the certificate. So if you choose the file over here, so I can take an alternate route because it was giving the error for me. So if I'll go over here and if I will just select this particular certificate, give me a second. So SFDX code is and open, right? So see here, if I will just do that, then also I can establish the connection which should be using both the certificate. Give as a name as SFDX codex, and issuer is basically then give some name and entity ID. This all things actually automatically it should be populated. This all things should be automatically populated or when you will select the certificate, but I'm not sure because I had my earlier certificate, so there was some mismatch because I changed my certificate. That might be the reason that it is not populating all the details. So once you just create, I mean, you select the proper certificate over here, this all details will be filled up and you save it, and once you save it, the common platform between this org and this org will be established and you can pass the data. So this is a simple and generic usage or use case for Salesforce certificate to use for the platforms so that the data can be exchanged. And the key section is also, as I told you, that if you just go to the certificate and key management, here you have all the keys, because unfortunately I do not have any key available with me, so that is the reason I cannot show you some practical version of that. So that's all about brief about certificates and Salesforce keys, guys. And here I am ending my session. There are one more things which I can tell, which is your go to the session, which is your certificate based authorization. So sometimes what happens, we do use our user ID and password for our authorization, right? Now without using user ID and password, this certificate, what we generated, what we were using, that also can be used for authorizations or authentications. So what we need to configure, if you go to this enable certificate based authentication, right? So here if you go to setup and uh, here basically certificate, um, identity identity verification, right? I think in identity verification, if you go, yeah, so in identity verification, yeah, there is an option called let users authenticate with a certificate. So if you do so, what will happen, instead of username and password, you can authenticate or you can log into the org using that particular certificate as well. So what will happen in this case, in this org, what you will be seeing once your configuration is completely done, then apart from this particular option, what we generally see while entering into the org, we generally see the username and password, right? So without, I mean, apart from username and password, there would be a below option available that using certificate login. Okay, so here only, so if you go and while you just type login.salesforce.com, here there will be another option called using certificate just login. Okay, so that can also happen if you configure using this particular details. But I'm not going just deeper into that particular things, because that will definitely, I mean, due to the time constraint and uh, due to some other limitations which we need to set up. So this is also a certificate based authentication. You can definitely try. You can definitely try. Just you just there is a, if you go to enable certificate based authentication, if you just go over there, then it will directly go and it will directly just go into your help.salesforce.com, and they have given all the steps over here. Enable certificate based authentication, and here this is the first step that let users do that, and after that then upload a user authentication certificate. Once a certificate you just create, then you need to upload that, and after that basically you can use the same certificate in your login page to do the same. Okay, that's it. I mean, you people can ask if you do have any question.
Yeah, I have one question, Santa.
Yeah, tell me.
So, as you said that certificate and keys get expired after 1 year or 2 year.
Correct.
So, after that, do we delete that certificate and create a new one, or we renew a certificate?
It's basically no. If that depends upon your project and client requirement, right? So suppose a certificate is basically if you're expired, it's better to archive that particular. I mean, sorry, it's not. So certificates basically what you can do. You can either you can delete. It's up to your client requirement. Either you can delete it or you can keep that, right? So after 1 year you generate again a new certificate. Again that new certificate you share with the third party system, and again the process actually starting from, I mean, started will be starting from ground zero. Okay, but certificates basically there are no options that you can delete. So if you go to certificate and key management, Rupa, so here if you go certificate and key management, uh, I do not think so that there can be a delete option for certificate. Let me see.
Mhm.
Nope, you do not have any option where okay, you have that option, sorry. So you can delete as well.
Okay.
Okay, so
Because
you can delete,
yeah, because
and
if we
here it
delete,
will show the expiration date as well.
yeah, if we delete the old one, then we again we have to share the new certificate details with the subscriber, right?
Correct, correct.
Yeah,
Yes, correct.
yeah, yeah. And just one more question. So we have two different Salesforce, or like just now we just had the demo. Like one was identity provider and one was the subscriber. So we had two Salesforce, right? But can other third-party system like any in Java or .NET, any third-party system can be the subscriber one?
Certainly, certainly. So it is just an example. Basically, I do not have a third-party application which is built in Java or which is built in .NET. I do not have. That is the reason I cannot show you. But the main purpose is that it can be anything. It can be in any technology, and that particular certificate can be used. Only thing is that either the certificate should be authorized by both the applications. So if the certificate is issued by you and the Java application is using that particular certificate, so there that should be a mutual certificate, right, which is a mutual agreement between your application and the Java application. But if you are giving your self-signed certificate, and if you are asking Java application to use that, that would be completely your onus or your responsibility to have the proper authorization and authentication using that certificate, right? So any other application, any third party application can use any certificates, and that's the whole purpose, that we can establish a secured transport communication channel.
Okay, okay. Yeah, got it. Yep. Thanks.
Any more question?
Yeah, hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so actually you only discussed here about self signed one. There are
Yeah.
other three or four instances which you said. For those, is it same, or like what is the difference between the configuration between these and the others, like other three or four which you said, other than self
See,
signed?
so other that's a good question. So here basically we do have the Salesforce org accessibility, and we can easily navigate inside the setup, and here we can easily just create the certificate and download the certificate uh, as a metadata form or as a certificate form, and we can establish the connection. But while using the other systems, it depends upon their system as well. So suppose I have an experience where my other system was built in some Java technology, right? Now inside the Java technology, basically they were using on-premises applications. That means they were not in cloud. Okay, so they do have their web server, their application server. So what they did, when we have exported the certificate and when we have given to them, they have simply consumed the certificate into their web server. Okay, so whenever and when we are hitting the API call, basically, or that time, basically, when that particular web server certificate actually validating or taking all the responsibility for all this security. So it depends upon the third party system. You can, if it is an on premises application and you do have application web server, you can download the certificate over there and you can make use of that. If it is a cloud application, they may use some other cloud, they may use some other technology. So it depends upon into their cloud technology, that where they need to keep that particular certificate. And once they will keep that certificate, that's it, the job is done. Because automatically when your API basically will be formed, the API always will have to pass with that particular certificate. If the API will not go through that certificate, then all of our purpose is not be beneficial, right? So all we are mean for the more security and more security channel or more secured applications. So based upon the third party system, just we can form our API and we can hit into their respective places where the certificate has been stored.
Yeah, hi, I have one doubt here. So, as we have many flows in OAuth, right? Like, so we have Untitled or JWT. So, in which of them we can use the certificate, or we can use in some particular one only? Or
Say that OAuth, basically your OAuth is a different technique which we will do a
okay,
deep
so
dive. Yeah,
so
go ahead.
means certificate hitting a third party with certificate and uh, hitting a third party with any OAuth method is totally different, or we can use a certificate in any of one of the method.
You can use so that depends upon, again, that depends so certificates, basically, if your client actually says that, hey, we do not want the OAuth. Okay, we do not want OAuth. Our system
Okay.
doesn't support OAuth at all. Our system is very much legacy system, and it is a backdated system which has been built in 1994, right?
Mhm.
And we still have this particular mechanism. Now you tell us that how you want to establish the connection, because you are pretty advanced and new technology you are using, right?
Yeah,
So in
yeah.
that case, you need to explore that. Okay, so they are not supporting the OAuth technology, right? So what are the
Mhm.
other options? Certificate is basically, you can say that is it is coming from a very much old era, or it is coming since a long time. So I can tell you that when I actually comes from I do have some exposure in civil background. So in
Okay.
civil, basically, we civil is a technology which is a pretty good CRM in 2004 to 2010 span. Okay, and that time we were only meant for the certificates. So all these authorizations, all this integration, actually we use certificates. So if that is the thing, use certificates. I mean, your if your client doesn't support OAuth, your client doesn't have the OAuth features in their system, the certificate is the only mechanism where you can establish the secure communication.
Okay, okay, yeah, thanks.
In
And
addition to that, probably wherever the legacy system is there, in that case, normally people are using middleware or some kind of external layer where you want to do any these kind of thing, like you want to with authentication, or you want to create any other system for like a certification, other thing. The additional layer over there. That's why nowadays the middleware concept is coming. Okay, so the middleware actually handling those concepts of over the legacy system, and then they are taking or monitoring everything on those.
Okay, yeah, thanks. Yeah.
Another thing I need to ask that she was talking about certification expiry. For in that case, when particular certificate expires, then like does the connection snap or something like that? I mean, how does like uninterrupted connection goes? Like when you are having a particular certification expired, won't there be a downtime with the connected systems? Like the integration uh, will snap, right? That's what I want to ask. Like how come it is not? I mean, it doesn't affect the integration
It
between two
will be.
systems.
It will be 100%. Santa, you want to go ahead, or I can go?
No, no, go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah, it will be. It will be snack. That's why the expiry is always saying that okay, you have to be like a renew it. Okay, before that will come. Otherwise, of course, the whatever the transaction you people are doing with the two system, that will be impacted. And it's happening because in our organization also we have faced that situation, okay, where this issue there, or almost it will take around a full day to solve that issue, okay, because you, everything cannot be done immediately. You have to go everything with the process when you are working with the organization, okay. Your certificate is expired, and then it will go with the next level where the billing is required, financial things is there. So the process will take this time. Till that everything is not resolved, that will, of course, the transaction will be between two system will be hampered. So that's why the person who is handling, like the admin person, should always take care. And almost every before the expiry, we are getting email also that okay, your this certification is getting expired in probably in 1 day or 10 days or 1 month prior that. So the person has to take care. The admin has to take care of those things. Otherwise, of course, you have to go that step, that problem basically.
Okay. So basically, you are saying that it is done before the certification is expired, so that this issue doesn't happen.
Right.
Okay. No, this is another thing I need to ask. This is basically based on something which you are working. I mean, I'm not the person who was working in. So basically,
Yeah,
it,
now you the second option you are saying that what if the same certificate is not allowed? We have to add an additional certificate for that. So of course, every organization has a downtime. Okay, now like yours, whatever Salesforce org application is running, it's not at 24/7. It is getting used. Okay, with your users basically.
Mm,
Every organization has a downtime. So within that downtime, you have to replace that certificate, right?
okay. Mm.
So, like in India, if we are working 9 to 6, after 9 to 6, or sorry, 6 p.m., almost we can go with replacement. But the second person who is using, we should also take care of those things. So that's why both if both parties where the common time where they are not using, we can replace that certificate basically.
Mm. So usually weekends, I think. Okay, another thing I want to ask is that so this is basically related to some issue in in the work I'm doing. What is that? Not exactly my work, but what I want to ask is that, so basically there is, right, about currency management. We have like every month or so, often the currency is updated. The currency is updated every day itself, even like a
Mm-hmm.
dollar rate,
Mm-hmm. Right.
or anything, dollar, it can be euro, anything. So every currency, the value changes. So
Mm-hmm.
often what it happens is that we have currency management in Salesforce, in which usually we have this static currency management, that is it is static, but there is advanced currency management is there, where you can enable currency to be dynamic, where
Right.
like, yeah, we can configure for like the changes in currency. So what
Mm-hmm.
happens is that in one of the systems, like we have like, in my previous project we had Cisco actually. So in Cisco, they have like Cisco systems, and we have Salesforce. So you have to, it was what they wanted is that they wanted from their some Cisco systems, they used to get the data for different currency values every month. They
Mm-hmm.
wanted that different currency values to be updated in Salesforce from the Cisco
Mm-hmm.
system. So this is one of the requirements they were getting Diamond. I mean, that instead of doing it using advanced currency management directly, so
Right.
what they want is that, yeah, they wanted to
That
do it.
those all will come as you could go with the simple integration also, where they will give you a data, or you will pull the data from that third party system, and you just update with the your Salesforce system.
Okay, so this
Right.
is like simple integration they will do. I'm asking, or like it will be like something different for
No, no,
currency.
it's simple because you are saying that you have to extract data from the Cisco system, and then you have to just update to the your Salesforce system. You just go with the simple integration
Mhm.
whenever there is reflecting, or whenever they are changing it. Okay, so
Mhm.
you can go with that approach.